This story dates back about 7 years ago. I had graduated from university, but I was in a state where I hadn't secured a job. Being someone who doesn't act unless backed into a corner, I was the type to cram for tests the night before. I kept telling myself, it'll work out somehow, and continued with my part-time job. That summer, while idly chatting at home with my bad influence of a friend, Kazuya, a pseudonym, we somehow jumped to the topic of crossing Japan via hitchhiking and became engrossed in planning it. Before I delve into that, let me briefly introduce this friend. Kazuya and I met at the same university at the time of enrollment. He was an unbelievable womanizer, the kind whose brains seemed to be located in his lower half. But since he was inherently cheerful and straightforward, he had many male friends despite his troubles with women. Among them, Kazuya and I hit it off the best, despite our almost opposite personalities. Back to the hitchhiking plan. It was a sloppy one, to say the least. We decided to fly to Hokkaido and then hitchhike back to our hometown in Kyushu. Kazuya, being a womanizer, had the vulgar goal of hooking up with at least one woman in every region we passed through. Well, I was somewhat looking forward to that aspect of the trip too. With his long hair tied back, Kazuya had a bartender-like charm. He actually worked part-time at a club and had certainly had his fair share of success with women when we went out together. Thus, after applying for a long vacation from our jobs, I quit mine since I was planning to look for another job anyway, and Kazuya got the time off, buying plane tickets to Hokkaido, packing our giant backpacks with clothes and cash. We were on the plane 3 weeks later. We arrived in Sapporo, had lunch, and strolled around the city. Due to the unfamiliarity with flying, I was so tired by evening that I went back to the hotel, while Kazuya disappeared into the night. He didn't return that night, and we met up in the hotel lobby the next morning. He was grinning and making an okay sign with his fingers, indicating he had a successful night. Now the hitchhiking adventure truly began. It was the first time either of us had tried hitchhiking, and we were genuinely excited. Without a detailed plan, our strategy was simply go as far as we can. However, it turned out not to be so easy to get rides. After about an hour with no luck, we speculated that perhaps we'd have more success at night. Finally, an hour and a half into our endeavor, the first car stopped for us. It was only going as far as the same city, but heading south, so it did help us cover some distance. Our theory that it would be easier to get rides at night seemed to be correct, especially with long-haul trucks being the most common to stop. It was efficient and felt relatively safe. By the third day, we got the hang of it, buying cigarettes as gifts for truck drivers and candies for regular drivers in advance at convenience stores. The cigarettes were particularly well received. Whenever we hitched rides with regular cars, thanks to Kazuya's chatty nature, the car was always filled with laughter. We even hitched rides with groups of 2 or 3 women, and to be honest, we had some pleasant experiences. By the 4th day, we had reached Honshu. Feeling more confident, we indulged in local delicacies and enjoyed the once-in-a-lifetime encounters along the way. We made it a point to find public baths to bathe almost daily and decided to stay in internet cafes every other night to save on expenses. Sometimes, drivers would even invite us to stay at their homes, which we deeply appreciated. However, about 2 weeks into our journey, in the rural depths of the Koshinetsu region, we encountered a horrifying experience that would haunt us for life. Whenever it was just the 2 of us guys, Kazuya would start singing vulgar songs. That night was no exception. Earlier, we had been dropped off at a deserted convenience store along a national highway, and since then no cars had stopped for us. The stifling heat added to our grogginess. It's ridiculous that we were dropped off at a convenience store in the middle of nowhere. Maybe we should have asked the last driver to let us stay at his place, Kazuya remarked. The last driver had mentioned his house was about a 10-minute drive from the convenience store, but without knowing exactly where, it was a moot point. It was just past midnight. We decided to take turns every 30 minutes, one of us trying to flag down cars while the other cooled off in the convenience store. The store manager, understanding our situation, said, "Good luck. If you're really stuck, I'll drive you into town." The warmth of rural hospitality was truly heartening. However, after more than an hour and a half, no cars had stopped, and hardly any had passed by. Kazuya had hit it off with the store manager, And just when we were about to take up the manager's offer, a camping car pulled into the convenience store parking lot. This was the beginning of an unforgettable nightmare. The driver's door opened, and a man, seemingly in his 60s, entered the convenience store. His attire was peculiar. A wide-brimmed hat like those worn by cowboys paired with a suit. I happened to be inside the store at the time and watched him as he filled his basket with an excessive amount of Band-Aids and 2 1.5-liter bottles of cola. While at the checkout, he stared intently at me, which made me feel uncomfortable, though I tried to ignore him and continued reading. Eventually, he left the store. It was about time to switch with Kazuya, so I headed out, only to find Kazuya talking to the man. "Hey, he's going to give us a ride." It seemed that was the case. Initially, I had felt a sense of unease about the man, but up close, he looked like a kind, ordinary old man. Overwhelmed by fatigue and sleepiness, my thoughts were hazy. So he wears that hat because he's into camping, I nonsensically convinced myself. As we boarded the camping car, I immediately regretted it. Something was off. It's hard to explain what exactly, it was just a feeling that something was wrong. The driver had a family with him, which was not unexpected for a camping car, but still surprising. The driver, a man in his 60s. The mother, seated in the passenger seat, appeared to be in her 70s. Twin sons who looked well over 40. Seeing something unexpected can momentarily freeze your thoughts. The first thing that struck us upon entering the car was the sight of the twins, dressed identically in gingham check shirts, slacks, shoes, and with matching hairstyles, balding on top, sitting in the same posture, with identical faces. Even Kazuya seemed speechless. It wasn't that having such twins was odd in itself, but the eerie atmosphere was something that had to be experienced firsthand. We sat down as the father instructed, "Please take a seat," and were immediately engulfed by the family's peculiar vibe. We exchanged greetings, and the father started explaining about his family while driving. The mother's appearance wasn't fully apparent until then, but she too was bizarre, dressed in a pure white summer dress that resembled a wedding gown, with her face heavily powdered to the point of resembling a clown. The pinnacle of strangeness was the mother's name, Saint Josephine, with the father being Saint George. The twins' names left us speechless, Red and Blue. Red-faced Red and Blue with a blue bruise on his cheek. Who names their children like this? At this point, Kazuya and I exchanged looks, silently agreeing to get off at the earliest opportunity. This was madness. Primarily, the parents engaged us in conversation, to which we responded vaguely, distracted by our own thoughts. The twins remained silent, drinking their cola bottles in unison, even burping simultaneously, which sent chills down our spines. We were at our limit. "Excuse us, but this is far enough, thank you," Kazuya said, not even 15 minutes after the camping car had started moving. However, the father insisted on keeping us, and the mother made nonsensical claims about bears appearing today and tomorrow. Despite our protests and attempts to leave, the father kept saying, "At least stay for dinner," showing no signs of letting us go. It was nearing 2 a.m., an unlikely time for any dinner. The twin uncles remained silent as before, now licking stick candies. "This is seriously bad," Kazuya whispered. I nodded in agreement, unable to speak much as the parents kept talking to us. Once, when I didn't hear the father, he yelled at me, "Did you hear me?" That moment, when the twins suddenly burst into laughter, we were convinced we were in deep trouble. As the camping car veered off the national highway onto a mountain road, we stood up in alarm. "Sorry, but really, we should get off here." "Thank you." We rushed to the driver's seat. The father, endlessly repeating, "Dinner is ready," refused to listen, and the mother also urged us to stay for the wonderfully delicious dinner. We whispered to each other about fleeing if necessary, waiting for the vehicle to stop. Eventually, the car stopped in a clearing by a small stream after about 30 minutes. "We're here," announced the father. That's when we heard a childlike giggling sound from the rear door of the camping car, which we had thought was the toilet. Was someone else on board? This realization chilled us to the bone. "Mamoru must be hungry too," said the mother. It sounded like a reasonable name within the family. Could it be a young child? The previously silent twins shouted in unison, "Mamoru, if you go out, it's over." "Yes, Mamoru is frail," added the mother. The father suddenly burst into laughter. "Aha! This is bad. These people are full throttle, Kazuya whispered, using his slang for dangerous or crazy people. We got out of the car and noticed a man by the river making a fire. Was there yet another member of their group? This man was unusually tall and rugged, nearly 2 meters tall, wearing a cowboy hat and suit, an odd combination. His face was obscured by the hat, and the crucifix painted on the front of the camping car added to the eerie atmosphere. He whistled "The March of the Mikado" while dissecting something with a large knife, which appeared to be an animal, perhaps a boar or a stray dog. Neither option was appetizing. While planning our escape, the sudden appearance of the large man and the sight of the large knife made us hesitate.